Let me just, if I may, open proceedings by welcoming all of our participants who I can see are continuing to join us in this webinar. This is one of a number of webinars undertaken by the Cambridgeshire Development Forum, which I have the honour to chair. The Cambridgeshire Development Forum, now been around some 6 years, it brings together those who have an interest in the development processes in Cambridge and its surrounding region. And in particular to try and ensure the effective delivery of high quality development in our region. We don't regard ourselves as either responsible for plan making or indeed for promoting any individual sites. What we do is work with those who make the plans to ensure that we have effective delivery on those plans. And as part of that process, we have had some excellent relationships with the local authorities and the combined authority in enabling Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and our surrounding area to be not only an area of real importance in terms of the economic growth, but also we hope continuing to be a splendid place in which to live. So we are very glad to have this opportunity to bring together the mayoral candidates of the three main parties and to give them an opportunity to tell us about their priorities in the development field for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and to respond to a number of our questions, a number of which I've already had submitted to me. If, as participants in our webinar, you want to add a question, please use the Q&A function, and I or our Secretary Rosa will pick it up and try to insert it into our discussion. The format of the discussion, because it is we're in the midst of an election period, is necessarily somewhat formal. I would invite each of the candidates to make an opening statement about their development priorities. And then I will ask questions. In each case, I will ask each candidate to speak. I know they have agreed to be as brief as they possibly can, so as to allow as many questions as possible. And I will simply rotate the order for them to speak. If I see from the Q&A that there are follow-ups, I will try and insert a little follow-up if necessary. But mostly I will only intervene to ask the questions on your behalf and to seek any point of clarification if it emerges. Toward the end of the questions, I will just give each of our three candidates a further opportunity to sum up right at the end. So to open proceedings, if I may, I'll go to Dr. Nick Johnson, who is the Labour candidate for Mayor of Cambridge and Peterborough. Nick, if you'd be kind enough to open proceedings with a word about your own priorities for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in the years ahead.
Thank you, Andrew. And as a point of clarity, I'm actually the Labour and Cooperative Party candidate. For those who don't know me, I'm an NHS children's doctor. I'm based at Hinchinbrook Hospital, that's in Huntingdon, and I work both at the hospital and in the community. And I've come to the combined authority, the mayoral election, with a view of trying to do things a little bit differently, obviously under the Labour and Cooperative Party banner. I have made a big plan and make a big noise about what I believe are 3 C's: compassion, cooperation, and the sense of community to be at the heart of all public policy decision making. And that is something I see is going to be part of development. Development in our local area, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, is one of the reasons that we've had the post created, is because we're seen as a part of the country that gives value added. And with the value added, it comes with huge challenges. And everything has changed. You know, we have just gone through a year based around the COVID crisis, one I know and I've seen close up. But I think over the last year, we've seen a situation where we, as different communities, are looking for different answers to how we live our lives. So we've got more home working, we've got changes in the pattern of how we want to commute. And I think we should be taking some of the best examples of how communities have grown over the year and making sure that is part of how we take development forward. And it probably comes as no surprise that as a dyed-in-the-world NHS doctor, I'm very keen to bring public health to the fore of all of our development questions. So particularly looking at bringing a high profile for the experts in public health, and I don't quote myself as an expert, so sitting there at a board level, helping all constituents of the board, working towards designing communities, designing transport, and basically designing a sense of place into all future development, but making sure that we never, if ever faced again by the dreadfulness of COVID, that we'd be better placed to deal with it going forward.
Nick, thank you very much indeed for that opening statement and for going first. James Palmer, the Conservative candidate for Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, your opening statement, please.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Andrew, and good morning, everybody. 4 years ago, I was elected with a promise to look at things differently from a Cambridgeshire and Peterborough point of view, and to try and deliver in this county projects which had been put on the back shelf or frankly were never going to be delivered. And that's exactly what we've done over the last 4 years. A new university for Peterborough, 100k homes, completely transformed the adult education budget, invested into some railway station projects that were dead will open and begin. We've invested into every part of county. Our market town master plans have put direct investment into our town centres. We've invested into our city centres as COVID response, and we've also put direct investment into business across the entirety of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. But I felt that it was more than just what we could do in a 4-year period. I set forward my strategy 4 years ago to create a vision for the future of our county. So often in politics, we are working on knee-jerk decisions based around trying to get people elected in 4-year portions, and it stops high quality planning and high quality investment into our county, and it certainly has done in the past. There is absolutely obvious to everybody who lives in Cambridgeshire that the transport network and infrastructure of our county has failed to keep up with the growth necessary, and that's had a significant effect across the entirety of the county, causing a displacement of people who can't afford to live in the south, and then pressure on public transport services in the middle and the north of the county. We have an extraordinarily successful city in Cambridgeshire, in Cambridge, which leads the way in international technology and life science. And at Peterborough, we have an economy that's burgeoning and just waiting to burst forward over the next 10 to 15 years. And ultimately, we have to make our decisions not just based on the now, but also on the future. If we are to create sustainable growth on an ecological platform, then we have to look at how we deliver transport differently. And that's exactly what I put in place with the vision for Cam Metro, a county-wide scheme designed to bring forward sustainable growth over the next 50 to 100 years. Our county has been blighted by poor quality planning decisions based on short-term local plans, and we've all seen villages and towns and cities we love suffer with inappropriate development. It's time that we did things differently in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. 4 years ago, I started us on the road to doing things significantly differently, and I think that my record proves that I've been able to do that. Peterborough University will be the first technical university in the country, and it is designed entirely to feed the local business and the local need in the city of Peterborough and the north of Cambridgeshire. Cam Metro is designed entirely to create some sustainable growth over the course of the next 50 to 100 years. And all of the policies we have around this are based on education, housing and transport, those three key cornerstones of, if you can have three corners, I suppose you can, three cornerstones of the combined authorities' mission from government. So I think we've started. I think, as always with politics, there's a long way to go, but now is not the time to throw the baby out with the bathwater and have a lack of ambition for this fine county.
James, thank you very much indeed for your opening statement. Amongst our three candidates, third to give his opening statement is Aidan van der Weyer, who is the Liberal Democrat candidate for Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Aidan, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So I've been a South Cambs councillor in Barrington and Orwell for 8 years now. I'm currently deputy leader of South Cambridgeshire District Council, having led the campaign to win the election in 2018. And helping run a council has enabled me to do exactly the sort of things I came into politics for, making a difference to the lives of residents, building more and better homes for current and future residents, putting in place genuinely green policies and investments, providing support for the most vulnerable during the pandemic. So I grew up near Huntingdon. I went to a comprehensive school in Cambridge, and I now live in South Cambridgeshire with my family. So I know and love this area, and I want to keep it special while addressing the social and environmental problems that we have, and supporting the development of a vibrant economy. This year, we have the opportunity to change the way that the whole region is run with this range of elections, as well as the carried over city elections, many people having 5 or 6 votes. And to change it, to change the region, to make the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough greener and fairer. As Mayor, I would take climate change seriously, developing a very clear plan quickly to get the whole county to zero carbon with clear stages for that. For such a rural county, we have shockingly low levels of biodiversity and tree cover. We've got very little natural space that's accessible to residents and their families, and that's been particularly highlighted in the pandemic. We need to address these things. We need to find, I think, a new balance between agriculture, the economy, nature, and the well-being of residents. As we've been saying, transport really doesn't work for people across the county. In rural areas, public transport is pretty much non-existent. Towns and cities are clogged with cars, even now. So we need to provide people with transport options that work for them in their lives, more walking and cycling, excellent public transport alternatives that are realistic and attractive, and that can be built now, that we can get on and build now. For too many people in the county, life is too much of a struggle. Far too often depends on your background, where you come from, what generation you were born into. So we need to really put fairness at the heart of all that we're doing, and I will be doing that as Mayor. For example, building more homes that people can afford to rent and as well as to buy, helping renters get long-term stable tenancies across tenures, and getting more people into good training, especially apprenticeships, improving post-16 education, improving careers advice, raising aspirations for people. And so that we can give hope to young people who have been hit so hard by the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Aidan, and thank you to all our candidates for their opening statements. So I'm going to go into the first question. The first topic is related to transport, and Tim Holmes from Endurance Estates has asked a question about what are your transport priorities? What would be your transport priorities as Mayor? And in particular, he's interested in how would you ensure that your priorities and your projects can connect up with those of the government transport plans on the one hand, and of Greater Cambridge Partnerships plans on the other. And if I may add to what Tim was asking, since it's, I think, a timely moment to ask, what view, if you could maybe also add, what view would you as Mayor take of the proposals published in the consultation by East West Rail last week? In this case, please, if I could come to James Palmer first, please.
Yes. So thank you very much. I think, and this is the crux really of much of what is needed across the county. I mentioned it in my first opening speech. The clear issues are that the road network in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough simply isn't capable of taking the buses necessary to feed into in Cambridge in particular, but also across the county there is an issue with the road capacity. Ultimately, we can put some short-term measures in, and with the bus services we will be completely transforming the bus service. Franchising is our goal. Government have offered to work with us, and in actual fact they've asked us to bring forward our plans earlier than they had previously stated. So we've been asked to bring forward plans in May, which we'll be doing, and working towards that franchising goal in spring of next year. And really this is so important because it gives us the ability to control what goes on across the county, certainly with buses, and it gives us the ability to bring forward innovative schemes. A trial that we're delivering in Huntingdonshire with demand-led transport, demand-responsive transport, I think is going to give us a clear way forward to transforming rural bus services. But the reality is that, yes, we can do these things in the short term, and they're achievable over the next 4 years, and they will deliver. But when we factor in the growth of the county, it simply is not possible to put everybody onto buses. The network simply cannot cope, and particularly in the Cambridge area, there is not enough capacity within the city to deliver a throughput of buses, and that's well documented. It's clear evidence base behind that. So we have to do better, and we have to factor in what we've got and where the limitations are. If we look at the guided bus, the maximum capacity per hour on the guided bus is 1,200 people. It's already at virtually at capacity, and then Northstowe is yet to be completed. So we're looking down the barrel of a system that cannot deliver the transport necessary for the people who are living on it. So yes, the short term is to deliver an improved bus service. Yes, of course, working alongside the Greater Cambridge Partnership on the right routes that feed into the Cam Metro. But ultimately, of course, the Cam Metro is the right solution for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. There are those who would say, oh, it's too expensive, or it's this, or it's that. That's timid and weak-minded, in my opinion. The reality is, again, what we've done with Cam Metro is built in a funding strategy. We've built in land value capture and tax incremental funding. The latest work from Deloitte's that I had a report on last week shows very clearly that we would be able to raise in excess of 1.5 billion from those funding schemes, and of course, with international investors waiting at the door to invest into our county, it is the right thing to do. I think it's very important not to be swayed by the short-termism when you're thinking of transport, particularly of COVID, because we know that the network is not just dependent on where we are now, but where we are going to be. And ultimately, if we fail to deliver the right transport solution for our county, we will fail to deliver the growth, and household prices will continue to spiral, and that inequality that we have across the county will continue to grow. And that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable now. It was unacceptable 4 years ago, and it will be unacceptable in 4 years' time. So I think there's a big warning here. We either do not bid in to get the best possible transport solution for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and we allow money elsewhere in the country to be spent elsewhere by government, or we put forward a clear and concise transport solution for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, which includes future growth, allows control of future growth, allows housing to be built sustainably and ecologically, and to fit in with the agenda of climate change, which absolutely Cam Metro does, and it does it 100%. Or we completely fail in our obligation to the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and we try and put something in the short term, which will ultimately fail. So yes, I'm working with the GCP. It's not easy. It's very difficult to work with the GCP. They're quite a difficult bunch, and their vision of transport in Cambridgeshire is, in my view, 25, 30 years out of date, but I am working with them. And of course, we're working alongside government. I'm having regular discussions with East West Rail on how we can make sure that East West Rail complements CAM. Because without CAM, we're just going to get 20,000 people a day dumped onto Cambridge South Station with nowhere to go. So CAM is the glue that holds all of this together. It's absolutely imperative that we get this right. And short-termism will only deliver more and more of the same failure that I've been fighting against for the last 4 years.
James, before I move on to Aidan next to reply to that question, could I just ask for clarity? What does that imply for your view on the consultation that East West Rail published last week?
So I think it's an interesting consultation. I don't think there's a great answer in any of the solutions, to be honest with you. My view was always that the best route was probably Sandy Foxton. Aidan and his council, one or two others, bid for the northern route, and I always knew that was going to cause problems. So I think it's very important. The whole point about consultation is you listen to the general public. But whichever way it comes in, there's going to be significant issues. If it comes in 4 tracks and goes around the north of Milton and Histon, I think it causes a massive problem. I think there's around 300 businesses that would have to be moved in central Cambridge to accommodate that 4 tracking. If it comes through South Cambridge, I think that there are difficulties there as well. So it's not, in my view, the best solution. The best solution would have been a southern route that came Sandy Foxton, and that would have been the shortest route of new rail. But I think we're on a panel later. I'll be very interested to hear the views of the public then. And I think, as I said, this is something that has to be consultation led. It's a government scheme, and I'm only a consultee as mayor, or we would only be consultees as mayors anyway. And whatever solution you bring forward, it's going to be difficult for some people. And I think that's an issue that we will have to look square in the eye, to be honest with you.
Thank you, James. Thank you for, sorry to have to add a bit more there. Aidan, to you now, please, on the transport priorities.
Yes, thank you. The priority is really about transforming the entire transport network to be more sustainable than what we've got at the moment. Planning that over the longer term, especially with sort of our carbon reduction goals in mind, and that'll have a range of elements, and the reform of the bus services is clearly one of them. I mean, it's a real pity that other places have moved further forward with this than us. It does feel like it's been a terribly slow process. But we do need local control of buses. Absolutely. There's a huge demand, not just in the towns and cities, but across the rural areas for much better facilities for cycling and walking. And that's going to, the demand for that's just going to increase as electric bikes become more popular. And people realise that they can actually travel relatively significant distances, and what we're lacking is any sort of plan for a network of good quality cycling and walking infrastructure, which is actually required for it to be people to really substantially change their behaviours on this. There are some specific problems, in particular around Cambridge, that does need a more investment, a bigger solution, but it does need to be something that we can actually get on with now. The problem with insofar as we understand CAM at the moment, it's extremely risky. We're sort of putting all of our eggs into the CAM is essentially about two things, which is a significant amount of tunnelling under Cambridge and or autonomous vehicles, both of which are extremely risky, both of which will take an awful long time. And if there is failure, we will end up in 10 years' time no further forward. I mean, just on autonomy, Uber has just pulled out of investing in doing research on autonomous vehicles, having spent billions on R&D there. If we are transforming the transport system, especially around the largest urban centres and Cambridge in particular, then I think we can rethink how we use the space that we've got, both for different types of transport and to improve the spaces for other uses, and that means having less space for cars and more space for walking, cycling, and public transport. And I think we haven't yet explored fully whether we can achieve the transformation and the capacity that is needed for that without spending these billions that we don't actually have, which is another interesting point to remember. It's interesting. Suddenly, we have a new report from Deloitte that's not been published, but happily is being used for as part of the electoral process. The opacity around the funding has been really disappointing. The land value capture. We have land value capture. It's called S106. It's called SIL. It does not produce enough money to build a metro system. And we can only see whether government would ever agree to any sort of form of TIF. So that's another huge risk that we've got of proceeding down this road. East-West Rail, the benefits of having East-West rail links, rail link between Cambridge and Oxford are huge, especially now that the expressway project has been dropped. So when we're thinking about developing sort of outside of London, having that having a railway line as the backbone of that, I think really promising idea. We could be able to then plan for sustainable development. And it has to and I think there's some. That's why we've been sort of talking about the options around opportunities around Camborne. And St Neots and Bedford, is if we can design new housing growth around really high quality transport nodes, like with train stations integrated with other forms of public transport and walking and cycling. Then I think we could hope to develop types of new places that we need for the sort of a low carbon future. With the, I mean, it's still digesting what was published last week. I think some of the details in there are still very vague. I think, for example, the scale of some of the engineering that's being proposed just seems astonishing to me, it's slightly frustrating that the amount of information that's accompanied the consultation doesn't really allow us to understand what's actually involved and why it needs to be like that. I think it's obviously good that there's some more work has been done on the comparisons of the routes. It has always been frustrating that assessment hasn't been done throughout this process. I think we've working with the local groups both across the area who are scrutinising this. It's absolutely vital now, making sure that people do understand what's going on, and thinking through what benefits there are to the area. I think there's certainly some scepticism about that, and we need to make sure that we are getting benefits, and that's both economic benefits of the opportunities that transport links bring, but also benefits that we can have along the line. I mean, positive changes to the road network, walking and cycling routes, environmental benefits. Given the scale of this project, I think it's even a few days later, we're still working out what's going there, and we do need an awful lot more engagement and talking to people on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Nick, come to you as well on transport priorities, please.
Thank you, Andrew. I've not had a chance to speak after my introduction, so I've had to listen to a narrative as provided by everybody else. Put simply, I'm absolutely delighted that everybody on this is now pushing the idea of bus franchising, and it's fantastic that sort of the lead that's been shown by the Metropolitan Mayor of Andy Burnham to kind of take back control and regulate bus services is seen as an immediate positive. I think I heard the phrase James talked about timid and weak in regard to transport. Well, I would argue that we can't be timid and weak about bus franchising. And that's something I will put absolutely heart and mind into, particularly looking at the idea of developing a kind of specific network, which will be coming out of the Fenland towns, with connecting with all the kind of new rail routes. We're going to push the idea of the Wisbech rail link as well, make sure that we can look at all the options, but make sure we've got an identity. And then we kind of have to bring together the issue of where we're going with the East-West rail link. Now, I know it's contentious, but as a councillor for St Neots, and as somebody who sat for 3 years on a developmental planning committee, I recognise that we have to ensure that all our links connect up properly. Now, in terms of St Neots, I recognise how the route was initially going to go much further south, but when the idea came that it would be better suited to provide better links with Camborne, I was absolutely determined that we should be pushing to improve that link with St Neots as well. And then we actually have that big question about where from Camborne do we go into Cambridgeshire. And as has already been alluded to, there is a lot of questions to be asked about that southern route. And I absolutely recognise that we need to be considering the northern approach into Cambridge as much as we do to be considering the southern approach. There's lots to be said for a rail link that moves from Camborne following the A428 link and then dropping down through Hilton into Cambridge North. And I'm particularly keen to highlight the issue of what do we want from the East-West Rail? Well, we do want connectivity for our communities, but we also need to look about how we're going to be sitting for the greater good of the UK. We're having developments of free ports at Felixstowe and Harwich. So we're going to have a lot of freight coming through the area, which is a good thing. We need to take freight off the roads. So we also need to make sure that links that are providing good commuter routes also need to be clear what we expected from the freight going forward for the United Kingdom. Look, the basic premise was, in the inspiration came from Grant Shapps, a Conservative minister. He's talked about a plan that we take 50% of the cars off the road. I believe that with passion and not being timid and weak, using the bus network in the early stages, we can do a huge amount of good in terms of changing people's behavior. We will be using green technology, low emission technology for those buses. And in the course of time, I don't believe in the CAM metro system. I acknowledge that James has put a lot of effort into describing his dream and his ambition about that. I don't see that it is value for money. The figures that are being quoted per mile per kilometre, so cost per kilometre, are higher than HS2 and other track lines that are around the rest of the country. So I do not recognise it as value for money, and I'm prepared to work with the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership. I remember cooperation was one of my 3 C's, and recognising that there is other proposals that are on the table, and I will approach everything with a blank canvas, looking at everything and being open to all ideas.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for that, and to our candidates for those responses on transport priorities. We move on to broader development issues, and Will Nichols from Lampro has put a question on the Q&A, which takes us into this very well. So he asks, how do you envisage the combined authority-wide Cambridgeshire and Peterborough strategic spatial framework, setting the parameters for growth and development in the individual local plans? How would you seek to build consensus with the individual local planning authorities on the most appropriate spatial strategy? Now, of course, in our area, we have Conservative-led, Liberal Democrat-led and Labour-led local authorities with local planning responsibilities. So Aidan, could I come to you first in response to this question from Will Nichols, please?
Yeah, so the colours, I think, are not so relevant. I mean, we're working very well with Cambridge City Labour Council, and we have worked in terms of South Cambridge District Council with neighbouring authorities on their duty to cooperate. There is a problem with local plans not being able to think strategically enough to take into account sort of bigger investment going on, especially in transport infrastructure, and solving problems that are well beyond the scope of a single council. I mean, like the water supply in southern Cambridgeshire, where it's now clear that it's going to be a sort of a hard constraint on much greater development until we have some significant investment in new sources of new sustainable sources of water supply. So those sort of things certainly need a large look. And then we've got the Oxford Cambridge Arc, the strategic sort of great regional sort of spatial planning coming through that'll as well start thinking through some of these bigger problems. I think there's been discussion about whether the combined authority needs greater planning powers, and especially statutory spatial framework. I think there are significant dangers there. The advantages of a local plan is that it is it is decided on by people who are directly accountable to the residents that the local plan affects, and we need to maintain that in whatever governance systems come up. And that's a real danger with the Oxford-Cambridge Arc. It would be a huge danger with statutory spatial planning powers at the combined authority level. So definitely we need to be exploring ways of improving that. I think it's not whatever happens at that sort of higher strategic regional level needs to not be imposing especially site selections, site allocations onto and that sort of more detailed planning onto local authorities, where it rightly sits. That's the very opposite of principles of devolution that I think we in principle certainly agree on.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you very much. Could I turn now to Nick on this, please?
Okay, so there's a lot of detail there, and obviously different areas will have different priorities within their local plans. The challenges faced by Peterborough are very different to that of Huntingdonshire. And that's the point, you know, maybe over the last 4 years at a board level, trying to take a progressive plan and working together, it doesn't seem to have gelled. And you know, and I've in more recent times working alongside Huntingdon District Council, getting the feedback from the combined authority, it doesn't seem to have, we haven't pulled together as a whole county. You know, I look at Cambridgeshire and Peterborough a bit like a microcosm of the United Kingdom. We've got the benefits, huge benefits of a world-class university, which brings in, you know, world-renowned expertise, and it is an area that keeps giving in terms of value for money. But then in the middle, we've got the market town stretching from Wisbech to St Neots, where I represent, and they feel a little bit lost between the north and the greater Peterborough area. And I think trying to recognise that we are the sum of our parts and pulling together development, that's going to be the only way we do it. I'm not going to sit here and say, I know exactly where the best development needs to be done, but I have a sense, Aidan alluded to it, is that there is, the south of our area is full. There is a huge challenge to put this number of many people in that area of the country, and we need to distribute the benefits of development, the benefits of growth across the whole area. And, you know, that does start with things like helping. You know, I'll acknowledge it's good that we're going to have a university in Peterborough, but I think we need to now really, really start working together. And it doesn't matter so much about the political allegiances of the leads, because if we pull it together and we work in those 3 C's of collaboration and building community, it can be done. It just so happens, I think I'm one of those people who could do it.
Thank you very much, Nick. James, to you on this question of the relationship with local plans and local authorities, please, and development.
Yeah, I think the ability for us to have a statutory, not a non-statutory, but a statutory spatial strategy for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough as part of the Oxcam Arc is a gigantic leap forward when it comes to the position of mayor, and a gigantic leap forward when it comes to delivering infrastructure and sustainable growth across the county. Let me give you an example of where local plans have failed, and this isn't the fault of the district councils. They're working to a system which is a failure. I was a district council leader for 4 years, and our local plan was not delivering. We knew it, and yet we were stuck with it. In Huntingdonshire, South Cambridgeshire, Cambridge, and East Cambridgeshire alone, in 2011, there were 60,000 homes suggested by the local plans. Of those 60,000 homes, only 23,000 have been built. The continual problems beyond that are there for us to see. When people see the gap between rich and poor in Cambridge, that's because of the wealth and the cost of housing. 13 times the salary to buy a home in average salary to buy a home in the south of the county. This is a problem that needs dealing with. And clearly, unless it's statutory, district councillors and leaders will be advised by their chief executives not to join in and not to work with a wider spatial strategy. And it is imperative, if we're planning a future for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough that ticks all of the boxes that Aidan has mentioned and Nick has mentioned about fairness, about environmentally sustainable, that we work over a wider area, and we also have a transport network to feed that. So if you're in the position of mayor, as I have been for 4 years, you will understand, or you understand entirely, how limiting the local plan system is, and the insularity of the local plan system is to creating a spatial growth and sustainable growth for the whole area. I think, you know, the points that have been made about improving transport across the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, you know, we're clearly involved in A10, A47, Wisbech Rail, upgrade of Ely North Junction to allow more trains and more stops through the Fenland stations. These are things that need to be discussed as part of a spatial strategy. And let me give you an example of where this is important. Mayney is a small village in the Fens. It has a railway station that's 28 minutes from Cambridge. A 4-bedroom house in Mayney is around 250,000. A 4-bedroom house in Cambridge is around 1.25 million. You can't commute to Cambridge from Mayney because the railway the current franchise doesn't stop there at commutable times. You can't commute really from March because the last train is at 8 o'clock in the evening. There is a massive link between the disproportion of the wealth of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and the transport network that we have across the county. And this is why a spatial strategy is so important, because instead of siloing growth into particular areas, it looks at the entirety of the county and creates opportunities for the entire county. And that's why spatial strategy is what I call a great leap forward. And I believe you me, when this comes through as part of Oxcam, it's going to transform the thinking of individual councils into a much better holistic vision for the future for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
James, thank you, for that response to that. Can I just stay with the development issue for a moment and come back to Nick, then Aidan and yourself? Because Annabelle from Shelford has been asking about what would your view be of the proposals for major new settlements in and around the Cambridgeshire area. And of course that brings us, and I think Nick Burton has also asked a question about the use of development corporations by the government. So perhaps I can bring those two things together and ask you, perhaps starting with Nick, what would be your view as Mayor of the government's role through the Oxcam ARC spatial framework? Should they be promoting new settlements and major settlements? And more to the point, should they be using or not using development corporation legislation in order to deliver them?
I think some of that detail I would be coming to afresh, so I can't answer every single aspect of what is being proposed. But to go back, you mentioned it was Shelford. Now, my real concern, I can't reiterate it enough, is there is an imbalance within our Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. And I do think that the push to continue increased population growth, specifically in the greater Cambridgeshire area, is something that has to be challenged. I can see benefits in my own local market town of St Neots, how that has developed. And if it's done well with good development, and it provides the kind of what I would always say, something along the lines of the 50-50 split in terms of social and affordable housing, along with, you know, market housing, combined with a real passion for the connectivity about the transport. And that's where I keep going back to the buses. I think it can be done, but I really do think we should be looking at the benefits that need to be distributed around the whole of Cambridgeshire. And that means moving away from an insistence on growth, particularly in the south, but more towards the market towns and up towards the north. And of course, Peterborough. So it has to be combined with the Oxfordshire. And when I hear the Oxcam ARC, it often keeps being shortened to Cambridge. Cambridge is only as good as Cambridgeshire. We need the shires to be involved in all of our growth. And we need to make sure that when people are living at a distance from Cambridge, or indeed Peterborough, they are well connected. So no, I'm not intrinsically against growth, but it needs to be environmentally friendly. It has to be sustainable. We need to look at our resources, water supply. And when you consider all those things, I have real big concerns about the push to keep pushing Greater Cambridgeshire as the area to grow in terms of new housing.
Thank you, Nick. James, could I come to you next on this?
It's become more and more obvious to me over the course of the last 4 years that the only way to bring forward sustainable, ecological carbon neutral development for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough is major new settlements. And there's 2 or 3 reasons why, and I'm going to expand on them. First of all of us live in towns and villages which have been blighted by poor development over the course of the last 25, 30 years. Infill within towns, backyard development, next field development, short-term decisions made to hit local plan targets. And these are the things that really wind people up when it comes to planning. And this is why we see a great deal of anger from local people when developments are put forward. And one of the things that people tend to say over and over again when they're against development is we haven't got the infrastructure to support it. And of course, they're absolutely right, because we haven't got the infrastructure to support it. So it's become more and more obvious to me that if we want to create sustainable development, we have to do so around public transport. We have to put in the public transport in advance, and then we build the new towns around that. And that does 2 things. Good quality, high quality design of new towns creates, and you only have to look at Letchworth as an example of that, creates a highly sustainable and successful community. But also it protects the communities that we have and we love and we understand. And I think just ever continuing expansion of market towns without high quality infrastructure is going to be a failure, and already has been a failure. Ever continuing growth onto villages which were never built for it is going to be a failure, and has been a failure. And therefore the only solution is to develop new towns in appropriate places that are built where public transport is built in advance, and that they are designed around public transport. And you take the car out of the equation. And of course, going back to CAM, that's exactly what CAM does. It does all the things Nick said about reaching into the shires, reaching into the county and creating opportunities away from South Cambridge, but it also allows for sustainable growth within South Cambridge. But I want to put a warning in here as well. If we sign up to spurious applications or ideas like Fakenham, which are being dumped onto us by a small company in the south of England without any adherence at all to the local transport, then we just perpetuate the continual failure that we've seen when Camborne was planned with no public transport, when Northstowe was planned to feed the guided bus, but there's never the capacity in the guided bus to feed it. Waterbeach was planned and the local authority had put no amendments in for improvements to the road network at all. So, and have allowed planning to begin without the new railway station being built. So there are issues here where there's not enough forward thinking, and it's short-term knee-jerk decisions. If we're going to do things properly, if we're going to create a sustainable county that can cope with the growth, and let's be honest, all of us can say what we want, but Cambridge is a phenomenon. The Cambridge economy is a phenomenon, and we're building half the houses we need to sustain the growth of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So we either bury our head in the sands and hope it goes away, or we look at the mistakes of the last 30 years and we create a sustainable, deliverable public transport network in advance of growth that delivers what is necessary for a 21st century carbon neutral country.
Thanks, thank you, James. Aidan, can I come to you? And then I want to have one more round of questions before we move to a conclusion. So, Aidan, grateful for your response on this.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we do now have considerable experience in the Greater Cambridge area of developing new settlements. They're sort of, if you include Bar Hill, there's 4 at different stages. And absolutely, one of the things that we have learned is you need to have the sustainable transport, and in particular the public transport, in place very early on. We failed in that in Camborne. East West Rail is going to be one way of solving that, and some other form of high quality public transport to other parts of Cambridge is also going to be part of that. We're now addressing that. I think Northstowe, we've got things more the right way around. Waterbeach, there must be some misunderstanding because there is conditions on the need for the railway station to be built before Newtown East is allowed. And then there will be a busway there as well. Oxcam is sort of laying on top of that strategy that we've already got, and there is clearly very significant ambitions by the government for major new settlements around the stations on East West Rail. By the sound of it, we will be getting more information about what's actually being thought of there in the coming months. But it does feel like it's a whole different scale, I mean, that needs to be done with a lot of local engagement, and there's clearly a fear about DevCos in particular being used to impose things on local areas. DevCos do have a role solving particular problems. I mean, we do have problems with delivery rates in this area, less so than planning. I know I'm sure there's plenty of people on this call who will have concerns about how the planning works, but I don't think that's not one of the fundamental problems we need to solve. So there are some things that DevCos might be useful to solve, but it needs to not be about replicating a whole planning system and taking power away from local areas, because I think we have over time collectively across all parties shown sort of positive and constructive engagement in that. That being said, we just simply do not know the scale of what the government's thinking of. Yeah, the governance, you did mention this earlier on in the question, the governance of Oxcam is still rather opaque. It's we're clearly not there yet, and that's got to be a lot of work done on that, and it's got to make sure that all of the councils along the route, along the coal corridor are included in that. In terms of where we then what actually happens on the ground, just saying we need to put the transport infrastructure in place before the development, I think is easy to agree on. The problem we're going to face though is does the location of that development, is that determined by the convenience of the public transport infrastructure, or do we need to work out what is best for the development of the area, and then solve the problem of how we get that transport infrastructure in place? And I do have a fear about the way CAM is going, in particular on garden villages, that we're sort of getting that a bit in the wrong order.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask one last question, please, but I'm going to try and wrap at least two big issues into it. The question is essentially, firstly, about water resources and the availability of water resources, and whether, as Mayor, each of you would be promoting a regional water resources plan and public consultation to help to define how we meet our water needs in the future. Allied to that, a question submitted by the Friends of the River Cam about the protection of chalk streams and the integrity of our water, of our various watercourses. Can I link to that, if I may, in this round? A question also, I think, submitted by David Staunton. If we are serious about a climate emergency, what does that mean from your point of view as potential mayor? What do you think we need to do in terms of the development processes in order to meet our zero carbon objectives? Could I come, James, to you first, and then to Aidan, then to Nick, please, and then we'll move to a final summing up from each of you, please, in the same order. James, please.
Yeah, so clearly this is an issue, the water issue to begin with, it is one of significant importance, and it's something that I think we've probably got the answer to within our county, and it just needs that strategic vision to unlock it. I've asked Baroness Brown, as part of her next stage work on the Climate Commission, which was such an exceptional document that came out just a few weeks ago, to include work on the water shortages, the water issues in South Cambridgeshire. But it seems to me that we have the best drainage system in the world here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And that drainage system through Denver Sluice pumps out billions of gallons of fresh water every year into the Wash. And ultimately, where the Bedford level and the Bedford rivers and the Wash come down to Erith They are no distance whatsoever from Cambridge itself, with river links there. So it seems to me that there is a solution already within our grasp that would allow us to rebalance the water issues within South Cambridgeshire. It's something that we need to look at significantly. So we've asked, as I said, there are people far more qualified than I within this sector, and we've asked Baroness Brown to have that as part of her final report, and that report will come out towards the end of the year. So it will give us that roadmap. And going on to the roadmap, the second part of the question, what does climate emergency mean? I was asked to declare a climate emergency earlier on in this term, and I didn't feel that I had the information base or a roadmap to take me from climate emergency to an actual climate change plan and solution for our area. That's why I asked Baroness Brown to form a commission, which she did, fully independent, and that commission is giving its first report into the Combined Authority, which was fully accepted, and we will work on the back of that. But more than that, it's given us that roadmap to show how we can deliver, first of all, the very best climate solutions for our county. It shows us how we can create the rewilding and re-wetting of the fens, but in control of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And it shows us how we can double the nature sustainably of our county. So it is tremendously important that we use that report as a basis for how we create future growth and future development for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And I asked for the report specifically because, as I said earlier, the pressures are on our economy because of the success of Peterborough and the success of Cambridge as regional centres of growth. The pressure on our economy to deliver the housing necessary, the transport necessary, and the platform for future growth of our economy is there anyway. We either ignore that and close our eyes, or, as I've done with the Climate Commission, we create a clear map, a clear strategy for how we deliver the growth necessary in the most sustainable and environmentally friendly way. And that's exactly where we are, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Thank you, James. Aidan, to you now.
Yeah, thank you. I mentioned the water earlier on, that there is currently work being done on the possible solutions to the water supply issues in the Cambridge water area in southern Cambridgeshire, and that was the issue was drawn sharp into focus by the work that we have done for the Greater Cambridge Local Plan published last year, that described just how severe the problem is, and I mean it's severe at the moment. We are over abstracting, even if legally it's allowed. It's having a very negative impact on the ecology more broadly, but in particular on chalk streams, and so solving that is essential to being able to restore chalk streams with confidence that we won't be sort of continuing with the problems we've got at the moment. I mean, alongside that sort of policy work on the local plan, there's also been some excellent work on more detailed work on what we can do to restore chalk streams that we're looking at how we can sort of implement and support other people to implement. And again, coming back to the local plan and thinking about how the sort of green infrastructure and networks of biodiversity can be planned for, and enhanced and solving these problems of fragmentation and decline in biodiversity. So we're working on that through the local plan. There's huge opportunities to do that further at a strategic level through the Combined Authority. Bringing together not just local planning authorities but other organisations which involved Environment Agency, particularly, for example, and the Mayor of the Combined Authority has a clear leadership and convening role there. The climate emergency, regardless of whether we've sort of formally declared one or not, council I belong to has. It is here. It is serious. The excellent report from Baroness Brown made that absolutely plain. So what we need to do now is recognise that urgency through our actions now, accepting what the interim report has said, and then creating very quickly a detailed plan about how to start moving towards zero carbon with some interim targets, not the sort of long distant dates of 2040 to 2050. We need to be thinking about what we need to be doing now to be getting there. So if we're leaving it too late, that's the risk of just having more reports on this. A lot of what we do needs to be done in collaboration with different organisations. For example, one particular topic that's been interesting to some people here was about the carbon emissions of housing developments, which are still far too high, and just local plan policies or just talking about it with the industry is not going to make the step change that we need. That does need much wider policy changes, so that then the cost implications of that can be built in right from the very start of development, and not sort of haggled about at the very end when you get to Section 106 stages, and you're sort of then having to lose either transport infrastructure or affordable housing just to improve climate standards. Significant improvements in climate housing standards and climate emissions isn't something that we can be negotiating against these other really important things like affordable housing and transport.
Thank you very much, Aidan. Nick, can I come to you before we go to our final remark?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, both James and Aidan have given quite long and diligent, wordy answers, but I'll just keep it short. In terms of the question was, would you set up a regional water resources management structure? And I absolutely would. It needs to be done. And we're talking here about the taking too much away from the chalk streams and the problems about the water table. But we also had a similar problem, well, a very different problem, too much water being in the wrong place. We haven't even heard about flooding. Flooding over the Christmas period linked to runoff from big overdevelopment and obviously management around the Great Ouse caused significant problems across the whole of our area. So we do need to kind of re-look at how we approach water management per se. And, you know, I do wonder, as people have looked on, they'll have seen different answers from different people. And I would just say that as my journey of being a candidate and learning and sort of taking on board what I've learned as a councillor, one of the most striking things when I was approached by some of the groups we've already mentioned was when I sat in on a talk about the chalk streams, as I never knew that Fergal Sharkey, a man who I used to listen to as a teenager, was I didn't know he was such a diligent trout fisherman, but it really shook me. And, I got into this because I wanted to make sure that communities were protected. And look, growth is going to be so important for our area. It is reason, we give value added, but I have reiterated it once and I'll say it again. I have real concerns about the overexploitation of resources in the greater Cambridgeshire area. And, Cambridge or Cambridgeshire is nothing if it hasn't got the CAM. If we overuse those resources, we'll just be bridge. So let's be kind of sensible how we look going forward. It does involve working with local plans, and yes, with strategic planning and maybe some statutory powers, we can kind of approach things in a different area. All of that is under the umbrella of kind of being environmentally friendly in the green agenda. And all I can say is time and time again, my frustration when I see in development, we refer to things about Section 106 money. We should be future-proofing all the homes. Gas boilers should not be going in to houses and new developments at the moment. We should be thinking about making a big push about how we collect water on new developments, making sure that we use grey water, looking at how we use tree cover to make sure that we don't get excessive runoff. And in all honesty, in the same way that I started this by talking about being a doctor and the importance of having a public health overview at a board level at the in terms of the combined authority. There's a good point to be had for having staff that are informing and helping people like me. The green agenda to me seems very sensible, but I wasn't truly aware of the issue of chalk streams, and I've lived here for 15 years. We need experts informing us at the combined authority, taking that message back through the leadership, the district council and the county council, saying enough is enough, and we have to enforce those kind of green agenda type issues. So one final thought is, I mentioned about Cambridge is nothing without the CAM. Well, it's also true that water and water management has been a profile of the whole of our county. Van Moyden, in his kind of drainage of the fens, it's water is at the heart of what our county does. And if we lose it, if we don't recognise it, we'll have a problem. But at the same time, it can be resourced, and we can look at the idea of tourism. Ironically, only this week, we had the boat race on the CAM. It was a fantastic example of showing off our county. And in the course of time, there's growth in tourism as well. So yeah, I'm really up for regional water management, and particularly don't forget the flood management as well as the water table.
Thank you very much, Nick. And time is against us. As always, you've stimulated questions that have been coming in as we've been, as you've been answering previous questions, but I won't have time to take them all. So I do apologise to those participants whose questions have not been answered, but I think we got through the majority of those. Can I ask each of you, perhaps James first, then Aidan, then Nick, just to sum up, but in particular, if I may, just by saying, well, could you just say, looking forward to 2025, after the next mayoral term, what do you think you will have achieved that people will remark upon? What would be the things that you would hope to achieve in those 4 years? James first, please. Sorry, we have to be very brief now because we've overrun our time, but James first.
Okay, well, I will be very brief. I'm standing for election on a basis of education, housing and transport, and those are the three measures where I expect to be judged, and I think where we are on each one of them. Housing, it's clear to me that the national policy is not working for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We have massively high levels of employment in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but a significant amount of low-paid people who are stuck in rent that they don't want to be. Every survey tells you that people want to own their own house. That's what the 100k home is telling us. We've developed the concept, we've proved the concept. We will now go out and build them in every part of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. My ambition is to build upwards of 500 homes a year, part of the process for delivering 100k homes. So that's the first thing. Clearly, education, what we've done already with Peterborough University to get it from a project going absolutely nowhere, dead in the water, to deliver at the opening date of September next year is a triumph. We've been able to get local investment through business and national investment through government into phase 1 and phase 2. And our ambition, of course, is to take that to stage 3 and stage 4. And our ambition for Peterborough University must be that it becomes a fully independent university, that it will through the roadmap that it's on, but also that it creates a technical engineering centre that can do for Harvard what MIT has done in America. And I think that's the ambition we should have, and we should aim as high as possible. And the third, of course, is transport. And it's, yes, Cam Metro, but it's Wisbeach Rail, it's A47, it's A10. It's that total strategy throughout the whole county, building on what we've done already with Soham Railway Station, with Kingsdyke Crossing, and of course, the junction improvements that we've made across the county already.
Thank you very much. Aidan, your concluding remarks, please.
Yeah, so as mayor, in 4 years' time, I will have changed the direction of, that we're going in transport policy, so that we have a shared vision for sustainable transport, really high quality public transport, clear strategies for walking and cycling, creating networks. I will have put in place very quickly plans and started implementing them, plans for tackling climate change and reversing the biodiversity crisis, along with other organisations and councils. I will have made an actual dent in the housing affordability crisis that we've got by using the funding that we have effectively to provide affordable housing, and I will have created an ambitious skills and apprenticeships programme that is really giving a better future to the young people in the county hit so hard by the pandemic.
Aidan, thank you very much. Nick, you were very kind enough to open proceedings, and we'd be very grateful to you now if you would conclude proceedings.
Is this the closing remarks for everybody? Is it?
Apart from my thanking people, but yes, please.
Okay. So, what would I want to see in 2025? Well, I would actually want the communities and the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough actually to know who the mayor is and what the combined authority does. And I think it's my duty when I win as the successful candidate as the Labour and Cooperative Party thing is that I will begin to show in what a committed mayor and combined authority can do. I talked about the 3 C's, the compassion, the cooperation, the community. And it's only by using those 3 C's working across the boards, we can show how different politics can be done. In truth, the things that I really want to, maybe people will be talking about, they'll say, oh, that's the mayor who brought us the Fenland Tigers. You know, the Fenland Tigers is a vision of buses running on a green ticket on their electric, low carbon emissions, making sure that we're connecting every single community in a meaningful way. And as we see the transport between our different areas, linking in Peterborough, the Fenland towns, and Greater Cambridgeshire, we begin to see the growth that we see. And when we say growth, we'll talk about the houses, and it'll be the mayor who delivered 50-50. In other words, where you've had developments, 50% will be social, affordable housing, and 50% sort of market houses. So that's really what I want to be. I want to be somebody who looks in 4 years' time, there's a mayor that actually is listening to the local communities, somebody who is identifiable, who creates a sense of community, a sense of place, and actually delivers meaningful change in terms of housing and transport.
Thank you very much. And thank you to each of our mayoral candidates for being so generous with their time and so full in their answers and helpful in their answers. Give us an opportunity really to assess what the prospects look like. Can I say a special thank you to all of our participants, a substantial proportion of whom have stayed 20 minutes beyond our published timetable to listen to the debate, and we're most grateful for that. The Cambridgeshire Development Forum thanks all of those who've worked with us to help make this happen, including one of our members, Skyline Comms. We're very grateful to them, and James helped me for that too. So thank you all very much indeed. The Cambridgeshire Development Forum will be meeting again later in April. If you are not a member of the forum and would like to be too, please get in touch through to info@CamDevForum and have a look at what our programme is on your website. But finally, I want to wish each of our candidates happy campaigning. I hope, I must be non-partisan and say that I hope the sun shines on all of you, because in my personal experience, campaigning in the sunshine is a lot better than campaigning in the rain. So do enjoy it out there. I know people will much appreciate seeing all of you on the campaign trail and talking to you about these issues that affect all of us so much. Thank you very much. Good luck. And we look forward to working with whoever is our mayor and the combined authority after May 6th. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now. Bye-bye all.